Maeve Callahan, 32, stood frozen in the doorway of her childhood home, as her father's words cut through the air like shattered glass. This place isn't for losers. 20 years later, she returns to that same doorstep, clutching documents that would unravel the family's darkest secret, one that would force her parents to finally face the daughter they betrayed and abandoned on a holiday meant for gratitude. Before I dive into this family revenge drama that changed my life forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy real-life stories of family betrayal and sweet, sweet justice. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma finally caught up to the people who should have protected me. The aroma of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie had once been symbols of comfort and belonging for Maeve Callahan. Growing up in the affluent suburb of Oak Ridge, Connecticut, Thanksgiving at the Callahan household had always been a production worthy of a magazine spread. Her mother Eleanor was known throughout the neighborhood for her immaculate hosting skills, while her father James, a prominent investment banker, provided the lifestyle that made such displays possible. At 12 years old, Maeve had learned to navigate the complex dynamics of her family's social standing. She understood that appearances mattered more than authenticity in the Callahan household. Her older sister Victoria had mastered this game, excelling in academics and extracurriculars with seemingly effortless grace. Their parents beamed with pride at Victoria's accomplishments, her name perpetually on the honor roll, her athletic trophies decorating the living room mantel. Maeve, on the other hand, struggled to find her place. Diagnosed with dyslexia in elementary school, she battled through assignments that came easily to her peers. While Victoria collected accolades, Maeve collected concerned notes from teachers, extra tutoring sessions, and disapproving glances from her father whenever report cards arrived. "You're just not applying yourself," her mother would say with a tight smile. "If you worked half as hard as your sister, you wouldn't be having these problems." These comparisons were the soundtrack of Maeve's childhood, playing on an endless loop that gradually eroded her sense of self-worth. Still, she tried. God, how she tried. Late nights hunched over textbooks, weekends sacrificed to studying. While friends enjoyed their freedom, tears of frustration wiped away before anyone could witness what her parents would surely label as weakness. That fateful Thanksgiving in 2005 began like any other. The house was immaculate, filled with the scent of Eleanor's signature dishes. Extended family arrived in waves, each bringing side dishes and practiced smiles. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia, cousins from both sides, her maternal grandmother with her sharp eyes that missed nothing, all gathered in the sprawling colonial that James Callahan had purchased as a testament to his success. 12-year-old Maeve had spent the morning helping her mother in the kitchen, carefully arranging cheese platters and polishing silverware, desperate for a word of approval that never came. Victoria, 17, and recently accepted early decision to Yale, floated through the preparations, occasionally lending a hand, but mostly receiving congratulations from relatives who couldn't stop gushing about her bright future. "You must be so proud," they told her parents, as though Victoria were their only child. Maeve stood in the background, invisible, until her father called everyone to the dining room. The magnificent table stretched beneath crystal chandeliers, place settings, arranged with precision name cards, in her mother's perfect calligraphy, marking each person's assigned seat. Except there wasn't one for Maeve. "Dad," she asked, confusion evident, as family members settled into their chairs. "Where do I sit?" James Callahan glanced at his wife, a look passing between them that made Maeve's stomach twist into knots. Eleanor cleared her throat delicately. "Sweetheart, we thought you might be more comfortable eating in the kitchen tonight." The room fell silent. Maeve stood paralyzed, as 20 pairs of eyes avoided looking at her directly. Her grandmother's mouth tightened in disapproval, but she said nothing. Uncle Robert suddenly became fascinated with his napkin. "Why?" The word escaped, Maeve's lips barely audible. Her father straightened, authority radiating from his imposing frame. We have important people here tonight, Maeve. Business associates I've been hoping to impress. Your mother and I think it's best if you give us some space this evening. But it's Thanksgiving, Maeve whispered, her voice breaking. I'm family. Victoria stared at her plate, not coming to her sister's defense. Not a single relative spoke up. Maeve, her mother interjected with forced patience, we received your progress report yesterday. Another D in mathematics. This isn't the time to make a scene and embarrass the family further. The shame burned through Maeve's chest as she realized everyone at the table knew about her academic struggles. They had discussed her failures before she'd even entered the room. I've been trying, she said, tears threatening to spill. The tutor says I'm improving. Her father's expression hardened. Not enough, clearly. This family has a reputation, Maeve. Excellence is expected, not mediocrity. He gestured toward the kitchen. Now please let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. As Maeve turned to leave, mortification coloring her cheeks, her father added the words that would haunt her for decades. This place isn't for losers. The kitchen felt cavernous as Maeve sat alone at the counter, a plate of food placed before her by the housekeeper, who offered a sympathetic smile before returning to her duties. Through the swinging door, Maeve could hear laughter, conversation, the clinking of crystal glasses and toasts. She could hear Victoria regaling the table with stories about her campus visit, her father proudly discussing his daughter's scholarship offer. His daughter. Singular. As if he only had one. That night, after the guests had departed and Victoria had gone out with friends, Maeve overheard her parents talking in the study. Creeping down the hallway, she pressed herself against the wall beside the partially open door. We can't continue like this, her father was saying. She's bringing down Victoria's college applications by association. The Prescotts mentioned it tonight, asked if Victoria would be held back by having a sister with learning disabilities. James, she's trying, her mother replied, though her defense lacked conviction. Trying isn't enough in this world, Eleanor. We've given her every advantage, every resource. At some point, we have to accept that she might not have what it takes to be a Callahan. The silence that followed was deafening. I've been looking into boarding schools, her father continued. There's one in Vermont specializing in children with challenges. They take mid-year transfers. During the school year, what would we tell people? Her father's laugh was cold. That we're providing specialized education for her unique needs. It sounds better than admitting our daughter can't keep up with basic 7th grade math. Maeve slid down the wall, her world collapsing around her. That night she cried herself to sleep, feeling utterly alone in a house full of people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. 2 weeks later she was enrolled at Northfield Academy, watching through the rear window of her father's car as her childhood home disappeared from view. Neither of her parents hugged her goodbye. Northfield Academy stood imposing against the Vermont wilderness, its red brick buildings and ivy-covered walls, creating an illusion of academic prestige. But Maeve quickly discovered the truth. It was a dumping ground for unwanted children of wealthy families, a place to hide their disappointments away from judging eyes. The dormitory smelled of industrial cleaner and lingering adolescent sweat. Maeve's room, shared with a girl named Daniela whose parents had sent her away for behavioral issues, became both prison and sanctuary during those first painful months. At night, many of the students cried themselves to sleep. During the day, they attended classes that were advertised as specialized but were actually remedial, taught by instructors who had long ago lost their passion for education. They don't expect us to succeed, Daniela told her one night, 3 months into Maeve's stay. They just need somewhere to store us until we're 18. The words resonated with a terrible truth. Phone calls home went unreturned. Letters received cursory responses, usually from her mother's assistant. Victoria never wrote at all. When summer approached, Maeve received a brief email informing her that she would be attending Northfield's summer program rather than returning home. Her parents were traveling in Europe with Victoria to celebrate her high school graduation. Abandonment crystallized into anger, anger into determination. If her family didn't want her, she would create a life they couldn't ignore. The school library became her refuge. While other students rebelled through substance abuse or risky behaviors, Maeve channeled her pain into education, not the rote memorization her previous schools had demanded, but learning on her own terms. She discovered audiobooks that bypassed her dyslexia, allowing her to absorb literature that had previously been inaccessible. A sympathetic librarian, Mrs. Winters, recognized Maeve's hunger for knowledge and introduced her to assistive technologies and alternative learning strategies. "Your brain works differently, Mrs. Winters explained, not deficiently. Once you understand that, everything changes." By 14, Maeve had developed coping mechanisms for her dyslexia that allowed her to demonstrate her actual intelligence rather than struggling against her neurological wiring. By 15, she was outperforming most of her peers. By 16, even the school administration had to acknowledge that she was being underserved by their curriculum. During her junior year, an educational consultant visited the campus and administered a series of cognitive assessments. Maeve scored in the 98th percentile for creative problem-solving and analytical thinking. "You don't belong here," the consultant told her privately. "With these scores and proper accommodations, you could attend any university in the country." Hope, long dormant, flickered to life. Maeve began researching colleges with strong support programs for students with learning differences. She studied relentlessly for the SAT, using techniques Mrs. Winters had taught her to navigate the testing format. When her scores arrived well above the national average, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond Northfield's confining walls. Her parents remained distant figures, sending obligatory birthday cards with checks enclosed but never visiting. During her senior year, Maeve requested permission to return home for Christmas. The response came via her mother's assistant. The family would be at their ski lodge in Aspen. Perhaps another time would be more convenient. The rejection strengthened her resolve. Maeve applied to colleges without informing her parents, seeking financial aid and scholarships independently. When acceptance letters arrived from several prestigious universities, including one offering a full scholarship, she felt vindication sweep through her like a cleansing fire. On graduation day, she scanned the audience of proud parents, knowing hers wouldn't be among them. Instead, Mrs. Winters sat in the folding chairs, beaming as Maeve delivered the valedictorian address she'd fought to earn. "Our paths to this moment have been unconventional," she told her classmates and their families. "Society often mistakes difference for deficiency, diversity of thought for lack of intelligence. Today we prove them wrong." After the ceremony, while other students embraced parents and posed for photographs, a sleek black car pulled into the parking lot. Maeve's heart leapt momentarily before she recognized the family driver, not her parents, emerging with an envelope. "Miss Callahan," he said with formal politeness, "your parents send their congratulations and this gift to mark the occasion." Inside was a check for $5,000 and a brief note in her father's handwriting. "Well done. We've arranged for your belongings to be moved to storage until you settle somewhere." The message was clear: don't come home. Maeve endorsed the check to Northfield's scholarship fund and donated her graduation cap and gown to next year's seniors. She packed her few personal possessions into a single suitcase and accepted Mrs. Winters' offer to stay in her guest room until college began in the fall. That summer marked Maeve's true liberation. Working part-time at the local bookstore, she saved every penny for her future. In the evenings, she and Mrs. Winters sat on the porch swing discussing literature and philosophy. For the first time, Maeve experienced what supportive family could feel like: acceptance without conditions, love without expectations of perfection. "What will you study, Mrs. Winters?" asked one evening as they watched fireflies illuminate the darkening yard. Maeve had considered this question carefully. Psychology first, she replied. I want to understand how rejection shapes a person's development. And then maybe law. An unusual combination. I'm interested in educational rights, Maeve explained. How many kids are discarded because they don't learn in standardized ways? How many families prioritize reputation over their children's emotional well-being? Someone should advocate for them. Mrs. Winters squeezed her hand. I think you've found your calling. When September arrived, Mrs. Winters drove Maeve to Boston University, helping her settle into her dormitory and treating her to dinner before saying goodbye. As they hugged, the older woman pressed something into Maeve's palm, a small silver key on a chain. To my home, she explained. For holidays, summers, whenever you need a place to belong. Tears stung Maeve's eyes as she fastened the necklace around her throat. She had lost one family but found another one built on choice rather than obligation, on genuine care rather than social appearances. That night alone in her new room, Maeve made a promise to herself. She would build a life so meaningful that one day the Callahans would be forced to recognize what they had thrown away. Not for reconciliation, that bridge had long ago burned to ash, but for justice. She didn't know then how completely that vow would shape her future, or how dramatically their paths would eventually cross again. Boston University embraced Maeve in ways her family never had. The Office of Disability Services provided accommodations that transformed her academic experience: extra time on exams, text-to-speech software, permission to record lectures. For the first time, she could demonstrate her true intellectual capabilities without her dyslexia creating artificial barriers. Her freshman psychology professor, Dr. Eliza Martinez, took particular interest in Maeve's insights during class discussions. After a particularly nuanced analysis of attachment theory, she invited Maeve to her office hours. Your perspective on parental rejection is uncommonly perceptive, Dr. Martinez observed. Most undergraduates haven't developed such depth of understanding. Maeve hesitated before responding. I've had practical experience. Something in her tone must have revealed more than her words, because Dr. Martinez's expression softened. Theory is one thing. Lived experience is another entirely. That conversation marked the beginning of a mentorship that would profoundly influence Maeve's academic journey. Dr. Martinez encouraged her to channel her personal history into her research to transform pain into purpose. Under her guidance, Maeve began investigating the psychological impacts of parental conditional acceptance on adolescent development. During her sophomore year, Maeve's research proposal caught the attention of the department chair, earning her a coveted undergraduate research grant. She spent that summer interviewing former students of therapeutic boarding schools like Northfield, documenting patterns of familial estrangement and its long-term psychological consequences. You've identified something significant here, Dr. Martinez told her after reviewing her preliminary findings. The correlation between parental status anxiety and willingness to institutionalize children who threaten family image. It's a form of scapegoating that hasn't been adequately studied. Maeve's academic success coincided with personal growth. She formed genuine friendships for the first time, connecting with peers who valued her intelligence and authenticity rather than social pedigree. Her roommate Zoe introduced her to a diverse social circle, where no one cared about family names or zip codes, a liberating contrast to the status-obsessed environment of her childhood. During winter breaks and summers, Maeve returned to Mrs. Winters' home in Vermont, the key around her neck, no longer just symbolic but regularly used. They established traditions, cooking elaborate Sunday dinners, attending the local theater's productions, reading aloud to each other from favorite books. When Mrs. Winters was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer during Maeve's junior year, she took a semester off to care for the woman who had shown her what maternal love should look like. You don't have to do this, Mrs. Winters protested weakly from her hospital bed after surgery. Maeve arranged the fresh flowers she'd brought, adjusting the blinds to let in sunlight without glare. "Family takes care of family," she replied simply. The word hung between them, uncontested and true. Throughout college, Maeve maintained a deliberate distance from the Callahans. Her parents made occasional perfunctory attempts at contact: birthday cards, Christmas checks, a stiff congratulatory email when she made the dean's list. Victoria, now an investment banker following in their father's footsteps, sent an impersonal holiday newsletter each December, chronicling her professional achievements and vacations to exotic locations. Maeve archived these communications without response. She was building her life brick by brick and had no desire to invite toxicity back into the foundation. Graduation approached with Maeve at the top of her class, accepted to Harvard Law School with a prestigious public interest fellowship. The night before commencement, she received a surprising phone call from her mother. "Your father and I would like to attend your graduation tomorrow," Eleanor Callahan said, without preamble. Maeve's hand tightened around her phone. "Why?" The silence stretched uncomfortably before her mother replied. "You're still our daughter, Maeve." "Am I?" That's news to me. The bitterness she'd spent years processing threatened to resurface. "We've made mistakes." "Mistakes," Maeve interrupted. "You abandoned a 12-year-old child because she had a learning disability that embarrassed you." "That's not a mistake, Mother. That's a choice. A series of choices made day after day for years. We provided for you. You paid for my absence. There's a difference." Another silence then. "Perhaps we could discuss this in person. Your father has connections at several law firms. He could help with your career after Harvard." The calculated nature of the offer crystallized everything. Not reconciliation, but reclamation. Now that she was successful, now that she could reflect positively on the family image, they wanted to reinsert themselves into her narrative. "I've done very well without your connections," Maeve replied coolly. "I'll continue to do so." She ended the call and blocked her parents' numbers, a boundary she should have established years earlier. The next day she crossed the stage to receive her diploma with Mrs. Winters cheering from the audience. The Callahans did not appear. Harvard Law School presented new challenges and opportunities. Maeve specialized in education law, particularly cases involving discrimination against students with learning disabilities. During her second year, she joined a clinic representing families suing private institutions for failing to provide legally required accommodations. "You have a gift for this work," her clinic supervisor told her, after she successfully negotiated a settlement for a dyslexic student, wrongfully dismissed from an elite preparatory school. "The way you translate legal jargon into clear explanations for clients, how you anticipate opposing counsel's arguments, it's exceptional." By day, Maeve excelled in classrooms and courtrooms. By night, she meticulously researched a pattern that had begun to emerge across her cases: wealthy families using therapeutic boarding schools to discard children who didn't fit their preferred narrative, and the school's frequent violations of educational standards and basic care obligations. During her final year of law school, Maeve collaborated with a team of investigative journalists to expose abusive practices at several institutions similar to Northfield. The resulting series of articles triggered state investigations and congressional hearings. Maeve testified before a Senate committee, her composed articulation of systemic failures making national headlines. "These aren't educational facilities," she told the committee cameras broadcasting her testimony nationwide. "They're modern-day orphanages for children whose only crime was failing to meet impossible expectations or conforming to neurotypical standards." The psychological damage inflicted by family rejection, compounded by institutional neglect, creates trauma that follows these children into adulthood. Her advocacy attracted the attention of a prestigious public interest law firm specializing in educational rights. Upon graduation, they offered her a position as a staff attorney. At 27, Maeve Callahan became known in legal circles as a formidable advocate for vulnerable students and a nightmare for institutions that prioritized profit over care. I know we're all emotionally invested in this story by now, and believe me, things are about to get even more intense. The transformation Maeve went through is something many of us can relate to, finding strength after rejection and turning pain into purpose. Have you ever had to completely reinvent yourself after someone betrayed your trust? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you're finding value in this story, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these real-life accounts of overcoming family trauma. Now, let's continue with Maeve's journey and see how her past and present are about to collide in ways no one could have predicted. Maeve's 30th birthday arrived on a crisp autumn day in Boston. She celebrated quietly with close friends and Mrs. Winters, who had traveled from Vermont for the occasion despite her increasingly fragile health. The intimate gathering in Maeve's Beacon Hill apartment, a space she had meticulously decorated to feel warm and welcoming, represented everything she had built for herself: genuine relationships, professional success, and a home that truly felt like hers. "I have something for you," Mrs. Winters said, handing her a small package wrapped in simple blue paper. Inside was an antique compass, its brass casing worn smooth by decades of handling. "It belonged to my father," Mrs. Winters explained. "He always said that no matter how lost you might feel, you could find your way home with the right tools. I thought you might appreciate the metaphor." Maeve carefully placed the compass on her mantelpiece, understanding the deeper meaning of the gift. She had found her direction in life, created her own definition of home. 3 days later, Mrs. Winters collapsed in her hotel room. By the time Maeve reached the hospital, the doctors had diagnosed a massive stroke. For 48 hours, Maeve maintained a vigil at her bedside, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair and leaving only when forced to by hospital staff. On the third morning, Mrs. Winters opened her eyes briefly, recognition flickering across her features. She squeezed Maeve's hand once before, slipping away the monitor beside her bed, flattening into a continuous tone. Grief enveloped Maeve with physical force. The woman who had saved her, who had shown her what unconditional love looked like, was gone. Arranging the funeral and settling the estate fell to Maeve, the only family Mrs. Winters had claimed in her final years. Among her possessions was a letter addressed to Maeve, sealed in an envelope with instructions to be opened after her death. Sitting in the empty Vermont house that had been her true childhood home, Maeve broke the seal with trembling fingers. "My dearest Maeve," the letter began. "If you're reading this, I've finally run out of pages in my own story. Don't grieve too deeply. I've lived exactly the life I wanted, enriched beyond measure by having you in it. There's something I've kept from you, not out of deception but protection. When you first arrived at Northfield, so wounded by your family's rejection, I recognized in you a spirit too valuable to be broken. As the school librarian, I had access to student files. Yours contained information I believe you should now know. Your learning disability was never the real reason for your parents' decision to send you away. 2 weeks before that Thanksgiving, your father's investment firm came under federal investigation for financial irregularities. The important business associates present that night included people who could potentially protect him from prosecution. Your father made a deal that saved his career and reputation, but required substantial financial compensation to certain parties. The money they claimed was being spent on your specialized education was actually being funneled elsewhere. In essence, your parents used your academic struggles as cover for their own illegal activities. I've kept documentation of these transactions obtained through means I won't detail here. You'll find everything in the safe behind my office bookshelf. The combination is your birthday. What you do with this information is entirely your choice. Pursuing it may bring justice, but also pain. Not pursuing it is equally valid. My only advice is this: whatever path you choose, walk it for your own peace, not for revenge. You have become the daughter of my heart. Know that you were always worthy of love, exactly as you are. With eternal affection, Margaret Winters. Maeve read the letter 3 times, disbelief, giving way to comprehension, then to cold fury. The safe contained meticulous records, bank statements showing transfers from the Callahan family accounts to Northfield and simultaneous withdrawals of identical amounts, correspondence between her father and the school's financial officer, and most damning, a signed agreement outlining the arrangement in explicit detail. Her exile hadn't merely been about academic performance or family image. It had been financial fraud, using her as an unwitting accomplice. The revelation shattered whatever fragile forgiveness she had managed to cultivate over the years. After the funeral, Maeve took a leave of absence from her law firm and began a methodical investigation. Using her legal training and professional connections, she pieced together the full scope of her parents' deception. The important business associates at that Thanksgiving dinner had included federal investigators, who subsequently dropped their inquiry into James Callahan's firm. The timing aligned perfectly with her sudden enrollment at Northfield. Further research revealed that her parents had claimed substantial tax deductions for her medical and educational expenses, while actually using the money for other purposes. They had committed tax fraud, wire fraud, and potentially obstruction of justice, all while disposing of a child who had become inconvenient. The statute of limitations had expired on some charges, but not all. The evidence was substantial enough to launch a federal investigation that would at minimum destroy her father's carefully cultivated reputation and potentially result in criminal charges. For weeks, Maeve debated her next steps. She consulted with a former prosecutor who specialized in financial crimes, reviewing options and potential consequences. She meditated on Mrs. Winters' final advice: walk it for your own peace, not for revenge. Was peace possible without accountability? Could she truly move forward knowing her parents had not only abandoned her but exploited her vulnerability for their own gain? The answer came to her during a visit to Mrs. Winters' grave. Standing before the simple headstone, Maeve realized that true justice wouldn't come from punishment alone, but from forcing acknowledgement of the truth. Her parents had built their lives on carefully constructed lies. Exposing those lies would be both justice and liberation. Before taking irreversible action, Maeve decided to confront them directly. Not for reconciliation, that possibility had died with Mrs. Winters' revelations, but for the opportunity to witness their reaction when faced with their own depravity. She would return to Connecticut for Thanksgiving 20 years after her banishment, carrying both the evidence of their crimes and the strength of the woman she had become despite their cruelty. I have to pause here and thank you all for staying with me through this emotional journey. This revelation about Maeve's parents using her as a pawn in their financial schemes hits close to home for many of us who've discovered painful family secrets. If you're finding this story meaningful, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more true stories about family dynamics and justice. I upload new content every week, and your support means everything. Now let's continue with what happens when Maeve finally confronts her parents with the truth she's uncovered. The Callahan family home looked exactly as Maeve remembered, a colonial masterpiece of architectural perfection, surrounded by manicured grounds that remained immaculate even in late November. As her rental car crunched over the circular gravel driveway, memories assaulted her with physical force, running through sprinklers on summer afternoons, before everything changed. Victoria teaching her to ride a bicycle on that very path, her father's disapproving glance when she tracked mud across the pristine foyer. Maeve parked directly behind a silver Mercedes with vanity plates reading Callahan 1. Her father's car. Some habits never changed. Taking a deep breath, she retrieved her briefcase from the passenger seat, its weight reassuring against her palm. Inside were copies of all the evidence she had gathered, organized with legal precision. The original documents remained secure with her attorney, who had clear instructions should anything unexpected occur during this confrontation. Maeve had no illusions about her parents' moral character. They had sacrificed their child for financial gain once before. She wouldn't put herself at risk without protection. The doorbell chimed the same Westminster melody she remembered from childhood. Footsteps approached and the massive oak door swung open to reveal Eleanor Callahan, her carefully maintained appearance belying her 65 years. Only the slight tightening of her fingers on the doorframe betrayed her shock at finding her younger daughter on the threshold. Maeve. The name emerged as a question, as though confirming the identity of this unexpected visitor. "Hello, Mother." Maeve kept her voice neutral, professional. "May I come in? I believe it's time we had a conversation." Eleanor hesitated before stepping aside social programming, overriding her evident discomfort. "Of course. Your father is in his study. We weren't expecting company." The interior of the house remained a showcase of wealth and taste, with updated furnishings that maintained the same aesthetic Maeve remembered. Family photographs lined the hallway, carefully curated images that told a specific story. Victoria's graduation, her wedding, her children. James and Eleanor at charity galas and on European vacations. No evidence that a second daughter had ever existed. Maeve followed her mother through the familiar corridors, noting how Eleanor kept glancing back as though verifying she wasn't hallucinating. When they reached the study door, Eleanor knocked once before entering. "James," she said with forced casualness, "we have a visitor." James Callahan looked up from his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose hair, now completely silver, but still carrying himself with the authoritative presence that had intimidated Maeve throughout her childhood. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by something unreadable in his expression. "Maeve." He removed his glasses, setting them deliberately on the polished desktop. "This is unexpected." "I imagine it is." She remained standing, declining the seat her mother gestured toward. "I won't take much of your time, I simply have some information I believe you should be aware of." Her father's eyes narrowed slightly. "Information." Maeve placed her briefcase on his desk and extracted a bound document, sliding it across the surface toward him. "A complete accounting of the financial fraud you committed using me as cover, beginning in 2005. Bank statements, correspondence with Northfield Academy tax filings, claiming deductions for my special education, while you diverted those funds elsewhere. The federal investigators you entertained at Thanksgiving before sending me away. Everything." The blood drained from Eleanor's face. James remained composed, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his desk. "I don't know what you think you've found," he began, voice steady, "but I assure you, please don't insult my intelligence with denials," Maeve interrupted. "I'm an attorney specializing in educational law. I've had these documents reviewed by former federal prosecutors. The evidence is conclusive." Eleanor sank into a nearby chair. "Why are you doing this? After all these years, why come back now?" The question struck Maeve as so profoundly disconnected from reality that she almost laughed. "Why am I doing this? That's really what you want to know, not, how could we have abandoned our 12-year-old daughter, or how could we have used her as a pawn in our financial schemes we provided for. You," her father countered. "Paid for your education, sent you to a school that could address your issues. My issues were a convenient excuse, nothing more. You needed somewhere to hide money and I was expendable." Maeve maintained eye contact, refusing to be the one who looked away first. "You threw away your child to protect your reputation and finances." James stood abruptly. "What do you want, Maeve? Money? Is that what this is about?" The suggestion was so predictable that Maeve had anticipated it in her preparations. "I want nothing from you. I have a successful career, a home, I love people who genuinely care about me. What I want is accountability." She extracted a second document from her briefcase. This outlines 2 options. Option 1. You make restitution to the families of Northfield Academy students who received substandard care while the institution laundered your money. You fund a foundation supporting students with learning disabilities with no public connection to the Callahan name. You resign from all board positions and admit to your financial misconduct. Her father's jaw clenched. And option 2, I presume, involves public exposure and prosecution. The statute of limitations has expired on some charges, but not all, Maeve confirmed. The IRS is particularly interested in tax fraud, which has a longer window for investigation. At minimum, you would face financial ruin and social ostracism. At maximum, federal prison. Eleanor made a small, distressed sound. You would send your own parents to prison. You sent your child into exile for the crime of having dyslexia, Maeve replied evenly. I'm merely offering choices, which is more consideration than you ever showed me. James leaned forward, his demeanor shifting from defensive to threatening. You think anyone will believe you? I have connections throughout this state. Friends in the judiciary, former colleagues in the federal government. Your word against mine. It's not my word. Maeve tapped the document containing the evidence. It's your own records, your own correspondence, your own signatures on fraudulent documents. And it's not just me, I have the backing of my law firm, which specializes precisely in cases like this. She glanced at the antique clock on the mantel. You have 48 hours to decide. My contact information is in the file. If I don't hear from you by 5 p.m. on Friday, the evidence goes to the authorities. Her father's face flushed with anger. You ungrateful. Careful, Maeve cut him off. I'm recording this conversation legally under Connecticut's one-party consent laws. Additional threats will only strengthen the case against you. She closed her briefcase with a decisive click. I'll see myself out. I remember the way. As Maeve turned to leave, her mother spoke in a small voice. You never gave us a chance to make amends. Maeve paused at the doorway. You had 20 years of chances. You chose not to take them until your crimes were exposed. She looked back one final time at the people who had once been her entire world. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because actions should have consequences, a lesson you ironically tried to teach me that Thanksgiving. Consider it finally learned. She walked through the house with her head high past the family photographs that erased her existence, out the front door into the crisp autumn air. Only when she reached her car did her hands begin to shake, adrenaline coursing through her system as the magnitude of the confrontation hit her fully. 20 years of pain, of abandonment, of struggling to understand why she hadn't been worthy of her parents' love, all of it crystallized into this moment of truth. Whatever they decided now, Maeve had reclaimed her narrative. She had faced her past without flinching and spoken her truth without apology. For the first time since that devastating Thanksgiving, she felt completely free. The 48 hours following Maeve's confrontation with her parents unfolded with excruciating slowness. She checked into a hotel in Hartford, close enough to remain accessible, but far enough from Oak Ridge to avoid accidental encounters with anyone from her past. Each hour that passed without contact increased her resolve. She had offered a chance at private resolution more consideration than they had shown her, but she wouldn't be surprised if James Callahan's pride prevented him from accepting it. At hour 47 her phone rang. We'll take option 1, her father said, without preamble, his voice tightly controlled. On one condition. Maeve had anticipated negotiation attempts. The terms aren't negotiable. Hear me out, he pressed. We'll do everything you've asked, the foundation, the restitution, my resignation. But we want Victoria kept out of this. She didn't know about the arrangement with Northfield. She doesn't deserve to have her reputation tarnished by association. The mention of her sister sent an unexpected pang through Maeve's chest. Victoria had been 17 when Maeve was sent away, old enough to question their parents' actions, but young enough to be under their influence. They had never been close, Victoria always maintaining the distance their parents established between the successful and disappointing daughters. Still, she had been a child herself, shaped by the same toxic family dynamics. Victoria won't be named in any documentation, Maeve agreed after consideration. But I make no promises about her not discovering the truth. If she asks me directly, I won't lie. Her father's sigh carried through the phone line. Acceptable. Our lawyers will contact yours to arrange the details. One more thing, Maeve added. I want access to my complete academic records from before Northfield. All testing evaluations teacher comments everything. Why? His confusion seemed genuine. Because I need to understand exactly what you threw away, she replied simply. The foundation will need baseline data for its work, and my case will provide valuable insights. After a moment's hesitation, he agreed. The call ended without goodbyes, just the click of disconnection fitting for their relationship. The legal process moved swiftly after that. The Callahans' attorneys, clearly instructed to resolve the matter with minimal friction, facilitated the creation of the Foundation for Educational Support of Students with Learning Disabilities. $20 million, a significant portion of James Callahan's net worth, was transferred into an irrevocable trust. Former Northfield students identified in Maeve's research received anonymous financial settlements for the substandard care they had received. James Callahan announced his retirement from his investment firm and resignation from various corporate boards, citing health concerns, a face-saving measure. Maeve allowed caring more about substantive consequences than public humiliation. 3 weeks after the confrontation, a courier delivered a sealed box to Maeve's Boston apartment containing her complete academic records. That evening, she spread the documents across her dining table, reconstructing the educational journey of her childhood self. What emerged was heartbreaking. Teacher comments consistently noted her creativity, insightful questions, and verbal intelligence. Her standardized test scores showed dramatic discrepancies between reading, writing, and other subjects, a classic dyslexia pattern that should have been identified years earlier. One school psychologist had specifically recommended comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation when Maeve was 9, a recommendation her parents had apparently ignored. Most revealing was a handwritten note from her 4th-grade teacher. Maeve shows exceptional promise in science and verbal reasoning. With proper support for her reading difficulties, she could excel academically. Parent conference requested to discuss specialized approaches. That conference had never happened. Instead, her parents had transferred her to a more prestigious private school the following year, prioritizing prestige over appropriate educational support. They had set her up for failure, then punished her for failing. The documents confirmed what Maeve had suspected: her learning disability had been entirely manageable with proper intervention. The deficiency her parents couldn't tolerate had been largely of their own making, exacerbated by their refusal to acknowledge her needs, until they became useful as a cover for financial impropriety. As she organized the papers, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number: "I need to see you." Victoria Maeve stared at the screen, conflicting emotions churning through her. Her sister had been complicit in her erasure from the family narrative, never reaching out during her years at Northfield, never acknowledging her academic achievements or professional success. Yet Victoria had also been a product of their parents' toxic value system, shaped by the same pressures and expectations that had nearly destroyed Maeve. After careful consideration, she responded with the name and address of a cafe near her apartment, suggesting a meeting the following afternoon. Whatever Victoria wanted to discuss, Maeve preferred neutral territory. The cafe was busy when Victoria arrived, exactly as Maeve had planned, ensuring their conversation would remain civil in the public setting. Her sister looked strikingly similar to their mother, elegant in expensive clothing, her posture radiating the confidence of someone accustomed to deference. Only the shadows beneath her eyes and slight tremor in her hands suggested distress. Thank you for meeting me, Victoria said after ordering coffee. I assume you know why I'm here. Dad told you about our arrangement, Maeve guessed. Victoria nodded. Some of it. Enough to understand that my perfect family isn't what I believed it to be. She hesitated. I need to know the whole truth, Maeve. Not his sanitized version. For the next hour, Maeve outlined the facts without emotional embellishment, the financial fraud, the use of Northfield as both repository and laundering mechanism, the deliberate choice to discard a child rather than address her learning needs appropriately. Victoria listened in silence, her complexion growing increasingly pale. When Maeve finished, she pushed her untouched coffee aside. I always knew something was wrong about your leaving, she finally said. But I was 17, focused on college applications and my own future. It was easier to accept their explanation that you needed specialized education, easier not to ask questions. That's what they counted on, Maeve replied, from everyone. Did you know I tried to visit you once? Victoria's voice wavered slightly. During my first college break. They told me the school restricted visitors because it disrupted the therapeutic environment. I believed them. Maeve hadn't known. Northfield had never mentioned any attempted visits, though this aligned with their practice of isolating students from outside influence. They lied to both of us. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I have children now, 2 daughters. I can't imagine. She broke off, composing herself. The thought of sending either of them away for any reason, let alone financial gain, it's monstrous. Yes, Maeve agreed, simply. It is. What happens now? Victoria asked. To them, I mean. They keep their social standing, avoid prosecution, and privately fund restitution. They lose a significant portion of their wealth and Dad's position in the financial world. They continue their lives just with slightly less power and prestige. Victoria studied her sister's face. And what about you? What do you get from this? The question caught Maeve off guard. She had focused so intently on accountability that she hadn't fully articulated her own resolution. Validation, she said after reflection. Confirmation that I wasn't deficient or unworthy. That the narrative they created about me was false. It was always false, Victoria said quietly. You were the most creative, interesting person in that house. I was jealous of that, even while I benefited from being the good daughter. Your difference threatened them because it couldn't be controlled or directed toward their definition of success. The acknowledgement, so belated but seemingly sincere, unlocked something in Maeve's chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release of tension she hadn't realized she still carried. My daughters ask about their extended family, Victoria continued hesitantly. They know my parents, but I've never mentioned a sister. I've perpetuated the erasure, without even realizing the weight of that choice. She met Maeve's gaze directly. I'd like them to know their aunt if you're open to that possibility. Maeve considered the offer. The idea of a relationship with Victoria's children, innocent participants in this family drama, held unexpected appeal. Not for the sake of reconciliation with her parents, but for the possibility of breaking the cycle of conditional love that had damaged both Callahan daughters in different ways. I'd like to meet them, she agreed cautiously. On neutral ground initially. We'll see how it develops from there. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Victoria asked one final question. Do you think you'll ever forgive them? Maeve gathered her belongings, considering her response carefully. Forgiveness requires genuine remorse, not just regret at being caught. They're sorry they'll lose money and status, not that they abandoned their child. So no, I don't anticipate forgiveness. She looked at her sister directly. But I am moving forward, which is its own form of freedom. Victoria nodded, understanding evident in her expression. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry for my part in all of this. For not questioning, for not reaching out, for accepting the story that was easier to live with. We were both children shaped by their values, Maeve acknowledged. The difference is that you're recognizing it now, while they're still making the same choices they always have, protecting image over integrity. They parted with a tentative plan to meet again the following month, Victoria's daughters potentially included. It wasn't family reconciliation in any traditional sense, but it was an acknowledgement of truth, the foundation upon which healthier relationships might eventually be built. Maeve Callahan stands at the podium, surveying the crowd gathered for the inaugural conference of the Learning Diversity Foundation. Educators, psychologists, parents, and students fill the auditorium. People committed to recognizing that different learning styles deserve support rather than stigma. Welcome, she begins, her voice steady. 22 years ago, I was told that this world wasn't for losers like me. Today, we redefine what success truly means. In the front row, Victoria sits with her daughters. Their presence represents not reconciliation with the past but possibility for the future, a new definition of family built on choice rather than obligation. Thank you all for staying with me through this emotional journey of betrayal, resilience, and ultimately justice. If Maeve's story resonated with you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Or experienced how karma eventually catches up to those who've wronged you? Your experiences and perspectives mean so much to this community we're building together. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life accounts of family drama, personal growth, and the sweet satisfaction of karma. Share this video with someone you think might benefit from Maeve's journey. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our family struggles can be incredibly healing. Until next time, remember that true family is defined by love and respect, not by blood or obligation. Thank you for watching.